about Israel and Ukraine, but I want to start on Ukraine. And I'd like you to give us a thumbnail sketch about NATO's movement eastward and bring us up to what you have characterized as a very bad decision by Donald Trump, animated by the neocons in his State Department and in his National Security Council, to scuttle the INF treaty. But take us back to the promises made by George H.W. Bush and broken by Bill Clinton.
Yeah. A lot of the stuff that we're doing to push NATO, we own NATO. NATO is us. NATO is the U.S. There's no real separation between the two in terms of their strategy. And, we use it to push Russia and to contain Russia in really kind of a warped containment strategy. So there's that. And the treaties that we had, certainly the INF treaty that we abandoned, the Russians had still held to it. Of course, after we left, there's no treaty. Part of this had to do with a movement within Defense Department and the manufacturers to upgrade a lot of our older equipment, our older missiles. And also, of course, our excuse is the Russians were doing this, the Chinese were doing this, the Koreans were doing that. Everybody's upgrading their missile technology, and we wanted to get in on that too. And the INF treaty was in our way. So instead of renegotiating it, the Russians violated it, we said, and we're out. And of course, we were already violating it, much as to the same extent or more than they were. But this is an arms race. Unfortunately, when we talk about these long range and intermediate range missiles, we're talking nuclear. It's a nuclear arms race. And we're playing in that. We're spending, billions and billions and billions of dollars. And we don't hear about it so much, but that's what we're doing. And we're doing it to fight Russia, to reduce Russia to a fraction of what it currently is. I think there's no argument that the United States envisions control and economic exploitation of Russia's natural resources. It's a vast land with a small population. It should be an easy target. So in the books, the strategy books the neocons use, this should be an easy one. And of course, as we see in Ukraine, not so easy, but they don't have a lot of real world experience, and they have very short term. They think they have a long term strategy, but they really think short term. They think we do this and this happens. And it's not that way. There are factors they never consider, which, of course, is why we're in this mess.
Was there a time when the treaty worked, when both sides were honoring it? Correct me if I'm wrong, Karen. This is a Reagan era treaty. This is one of the things he was very proud of, that he negotiated at the tail end of his second term, probably with Mikhail Gorbachev. And he really believed that it would tamp down the arms race.
Yeah, and he was right about that, and it did tamp it down, and it also preserved some very needed sense of security for Europe, because the reduction of these intermediate range missiles it was the reduction of those missiles in Europe, which were most threatening to Russia, of course. So Russia was interested in getting them moved out, but also the Europeans were interested because they didn't want to be targets, which is kind of funny because it's exactly what they are going into now. But no, it not only was a serious reduction on both sides of these missiles, and I mean destruction. We had inspections, not just of the missile destruction, but we had inspections. The Russians came here. I actually carpooled, and he lived 4 houses down from me, a guy who was part of the INF inspection team, an Air Force guy. And he traveled to Russia a number of times and to actually conduct these inspections to see if the letter of the agreement was being followed. And I asked him when he came back a couple, 3 times, how was it? He says, fine. Are they doing what they're supposed to do? Yes, they are. And of course, the Russians had their teams inspecting in the United States. And so when you think about what that means to have Russians here looking at this and complying with an agreed upon treaty, an agreement, same with the US people in Russia doing this, in many ways, it builds trust. And you know how Reagan always said, trust but verify. Well, that's exactly what it was. And that's what that treaty was. Now, without a treaty, which of course we haven't had one for, I guess, 5 years now, to get to the point of trust but verify, which would be a nice place to be. We're not there. we abandoned that. But to get to that place, you can't do that tomorrow. It can't be done in 24 hours. The work to build an agreement, the work of building trust between nuclear powers takes time. It takes leadership. It takes faith. It takes energy. It takes adulthood. We have very little of that in our government today. So even getting back to where we were 30 years ago when Reagan negotiated this deal and his staff negotiated this deal, it will take, I mean, I don't know how we will ever get back to that. So we're in a very dangerous time because of it.
So not only the neocons in the Defense Department and the State Department, but the arms manufacturers themselves persuaded the billionaire in the White House, Donald Trump, this is 2019, correct me if I'm wrong, to withdraw from the treaty, and he did. And as a result, the arms race heated up. Did the Russians abide the treaty after we left, or since we were gone, there was no treaty, there was nothing for them to abide by?
They did for a short period of time where they said they did. Of course, we accused them of violating the treaty. It's not clear that they really did. But they did abide by it. They continued, I guess, maybe in hopes that we would come back to it. But then after they witnessed, see, when we got out of that treaty, we were already developing those new types of weapons, the new intermediate nuclear capable missile systems. We were already working on those. So again, Trump didn't wake up one morning and somebody talked to him and neocons said, let's do this. No, it takes years to abandon a treaty, really. I mean, especially one that was working as well as that one had been. There was a lot of incentive to upgrade on both sides. And so once we backed out or abandoned it, and we were already actively doing research and doing some, I'm sure, testing and production, not so much testing that they could see. But once we're not in that treaty, we're free to proceed at pace, which we did. The Russians see this